Let's talk about running backs that you need to be starting in week 7 of fantasy football. As always, we're going to break them up into 3 different categories: your smash starts, your solid starts, and your high risk, high reward starts. The guys on the screen right now are all obvious must starts. Don't overthink it. Get them in your lineup. They should already be in your lineup. Let's start with the high risk, high reward category. First guy up is Woody Marks, who people are probably pretty frustrated with Mr. Woody right now. He had a big, massive breakout performance in week 4. 17 carries, 69 yards, a touchdown, 4 receptions for 50 yards. Got into the end zone again, 27.9 fantasy points. And then everyone went crazy to get him on their team, spent all their fab on him, their number 1 waiver claim, whatever they had to do to get Marks on their team. People did it, and then he laid an absolute dud the following week. Here's what I'll say. I do personally still believe in Woody. I think he's the running back that you want on this Texans offense. And before they went into their bye week, when they faced off against the Ravens, they didn't have to do much to beat Baltimore, which is why I'm still very encouraged. Like, they let Nick Chubb run out the clock. That's fine. And while Chubb looked solid, you have to remember this Ravens run defense, this Ravens defense in general is horrible right now. Marks is still the better player than Chubb is at this point in his career. He leads him in all major efficiency metrics. Like, it's not really close. Marks ranks 5th in yards per touch right now. He's a preferred back on pass down situations, but I think he's much more than just a pass down back. We saw a taste of it. He looked explosive. He looked elusive. He looked really, really good. I don't think that's going to go away. I don't think the Texans want to put that away. I think everyone on that coaching staff knows Marks is the better player. And if they want to continue to win football games, then they're going to put their best players on the field. Marks is going to have a big second half of the year. I think this is a perfect time to be buying low on Woody Marks right now, because the Marks owner is probably frustrated, probably thinks he's going to be nothing this year. I completely disagree. If he's on the waiver wire, which he should not be, you should be grabbing him. You should be starting him this week in a favorable matchup against Seattle in week 7 against a really good offense and Sam Darnold, Jackson Smith-Njigba. This offense in Houston is probably going to have to be throwing a lot in order to have a chance at winning this game. And I should say, it is a little bit tougher of a matchup on paper, but with 2 teams on bye, injuries all over the place, you could do a lot worse. I think Marks needs to be on your team. I do think he's a strong flex start this week. And like I said, I would be buying low on him before it's too late. All right, moving on to our next guy, Isaiah Pacheco. I think the tides are going to turn on Pacheco the second half of the year. They already kind of are. He looks better over these last couple of weeks. Yeah, he's been a huge disappointment so far this year, but I think the Chiefs noticed that maybe he's starting to round into his previous form pre-injury, but they gave him a huge workload in week 6, 77% of the snaps, 60% of the rush attempts, 76% of the routes, 80% of the short down and distance snaps, 60% of the long down and distance snaps. All those numbers were season highs. And while that usage didn't turn into crazy production, it's still very encouraging to see the arrow, I think, is pointing absolutely up for Pacheco. And he turned that usage into 12 carries for 51 yards, 4.3 yards per carry. He had 4 rushes of 15 plus yards. You love to see that. 4 red zone carries, 6.1 fantasy points. But that was all against a really stingy run defense that the Detroit Lions have. I think this Chiefs offense is also really starting to cook. And now they get their best player back in week 7 in Rashee Rice on offense. Like, if this usage for Pacheco is going to stay, if he's going to be the workhorse on this offense, then yeah, you want to be starting him. You want to be picking him up on your team if he's somehow available, buying low, trading for him now. I think Pacheco is a talented player. He's had a rough start to the year, but I do think he's starting to turn it around, and I just don't think any other Chiefs running back is worthy of stealing snaps from him. We've always been a believer in Brashard Smith, but it just doesn't really seem like it's happening. Kareem Hunt is dust at this point. I think this is going to be Pacheco's backfield unless they trade for Breece Hall or Alvin Kamara, which seems very unlikely. So at this point, this is Pacheco's backfield going forward. And if he's going to continue to see that type of crazy usage, bigger fantasy days are on the way. And in week 7, he faces off against a very beatable Raiders run defense. And Pacheco also has one of the easiest remaining schedules for running backs for the rest of the year. So he is someone I would be trying to buy extremely low on. Like, you should not be paying anything for Pacheco, right? Get him his dirt cheap as possible, but I do think he bounces back the second half of the year. All right, moving on to the next guy, Tyjae Spears. I think Spears is going to be a bigger part of this Tennessee Titans offense than people think. Every single week, he's continuing to see more usage. In week 5, 5 carries, 31 yards, 6.2 yards per carry. Tony Pollard can never do that at this point. 4 receptions, 19 yards, 9 fantasy points. Not great, right? But we're talking usage here. 60% of the snaps, 44% of the routes, 69% of the short down and distance snaps. Spears is far and away the best running back that the Titans have on the roster. He has the juice. He has the efficiency. He has the explosiveness. Like, Pollard is just cooked at this point. I don't think Pollard is a very good running back. Last week, 10 carries for 34 yards. Not great. And the Titans being 1-5, they have nothing to play for anymore. They're not going to keep rolling out Tony Pollard at this point, in my opinion. I think Spears has a really good shot at taking over this backfield. He's a very versatile player, and he's a better fit for what Tennessee wants to do on offense and what they have to do on offense, which is throw the football, because they are going to be trailing in most games. I think Spears could be a major weapon for Cam Ward out of the backfield. They don't have any receivers this year. Alec Manor, we still like, but he hasn't really done anything. Calvin Ridley flashed, and now he's hurt. Like, Spears could be their offense. That's what's exciting. Even though it's going to be a bad offense in Tennessee, if Spears sees a ton of volume with Cam Ward, who I do think is a good quarterback, I think Spears can put up some really nice fantasy football numbers this year, and I don't think a lot of people see it coming. So get him on the waiver wire. We already recommended you to do so yesterday, and if he's on your roster, I think he has sneaky upside this week. We know Tennessee fired their head coach in Brian Callahan. I think bigger changes are coming. One of those being Spears is going to take over this backfield, and you can start him in your flex in week 7 against the Patriots. Not a great matchup, but this is a high-risk, high-reward section, right? Spears could still easily pop off in a less than ideal matchup. All right, moving on to our next category, solid starts. First guy up here is Breece Hall, who appears to just be done with the Jets, and I really don't blame him. He wants out. He's sick of it. They don't know how to utilize him. He's been on a terrible offense every single year that he's been with New York, and he posted on Instagram a picture with the hashtag free20. Like, he wants out, but as long as he's on this roster, he should continue to get fed, and it is advantageous for him to have a big year if he gets traded or not, because he's in a contract year. He needs to put up numbers to get a big deal, and if he doesn't do so, then he's not going to get paid. So he's highly motivated, whether he's on the roster or not, and like I said, he's going to get the football a ton. In week 6, he got the football a ton already. 22 carries, wasn't great, 59 yards, 2.7 yards per carry. He had 0 involvement in the passing game, which is going to change. We'll talk about that in a second. 5.9 fantasy points. And it's not shocking at all that Breece Hall, this entire Jets offense, struggled against a really good Denver Broncos defense. But the usage, again, we really like the usage. If a running back is getting the volume, you got to take that. And Hall is really getting all of it at this point. 74% of the snaps, which was a season high. 78% of the rush attempts. He's going to continue to see a workhorse role on an offense that might not have Garrett Wilson for a while. So how are they going to move the football? We like Mason Taylor, the rookie tight end, but outside of that, it's going to be Hall on the ground, probably a ton through the air as well, which is why I'm really encouraged for this week. We know Hall is a really good player. He's extremely talented. He's playing really well this year, much better than last year. He seems like he has that second level, that second gear that seemed non-existent last season, as he currently ranks first in explosive run rate, 6th in missed tackles forced, and I think he'll be a strong start in week 7 against the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers are not the defense anymore where you can just run all over. They've been a lot better this year. They've stopped a lot of good running backs as of late from having big games. So I will caution you there. But if you have Breece Hall on your team, with all the injuries, the bye weeks, you have to start him, right? I'm trying to give you some encouragement that it's going to be okay. I'm trying to give you maybe telling you to buy low on Hall. I don't mind that idea either, because I do still think he gets traded somewhere at this point. But Carolina is still allowing 5.6 yards per touch, along with 20.9 PPR fantasy points per game to the running back position. I think Hall will be very serviceable in week 7 because of the volume that he's going to see, not only on the ground, but through the air with no Garrett Wilson. All right, next man up on this list is Jaylen Warren, who didn't see great usage in week 6. I don't know if it was him being eased back into action coming off that injury, or if Kenneth Gainwell earned a larger role after he went absolutely crazy in London. But either way, Jalen still made the most of his opportunities. 11 carries, 52 yards, 4.7 yards per carry. Not incredible, not bad. 8.3 fantasy points. You would like that to be higher, but that's a nice performance against a really good run defense in the Cleveland Browns. And with Aaron Rodgers at the controls this year on offense, this entire offense has a much higher ceiling than years past, which is why I'm still a pretty big fan of Warren for the rest of the season. I'm sure Kenneth Gainwell, Caleb Johnson will continue to have a role, be sprinkled in, but I do think that Jalen Warren, when healthy, is one of the more dynamic, one of the more underrated backs in all of football. And he currently ranks third in missed tackles forced per attempt. He's a do-it-all back that should put together a nice day in week 7, largely due to the matchup. The matchup is chef's kiss. It's amazing. Even if he's splitting work with Gainwell, it doesn't matter. They're both going to eat against the Cincinnati Bengals, who have given up the most fantasy points to running backs this season. They're allowing 29.7 fantasy points per game to the position. So Warren, nice player. He's still seeing fine volume, and I would expect him to have his best game of the year in week 7. Next man up, a guy that we just can't stop talking about at this point, and it's Kimani Vidal, who we all know balled out in week 6, 18 carries, 124 yards, 3 receptions, 14 yards, got into the end zone, 22.8 fantasy points, and he saw that workhorse role for the Chargers, 67% of the snaps, 72% of the rush attempts, 56% of the routes, 6.6 yards per touch. He was tied for second in explosive run rate with Saquon Barkley on the week, along with ranking 4th in yards after contact per attempt. It's his backfield at this point. You put up those type of numbers, you help lead them to a huge victory, and you look really good in the process. It's over until Hampton comes back. This is Kamani's backfield. If you have Haskins, you can put him on your bench. You're not playing him at this point. And I think that Vidal is a very safe player with nice upside, like I said, until Hampton comes back. Even in a tougher matchup against the Colts this week, who are giving up the 11th fewest fantasy points to the running back position. And we know Vidal had a really easy matchup last week against the Dolphins, but I still do think he's going to produce this year because, like I've always said, I do think he's a really talented running back. Turn on the tape, watch the highlights. He's really good, and he's on a good Chargers offense where he's going to see the majority of the work. And if he's on your roster, you can start him. You can feel good about it. Maybe temper expectations a little bit, right? Because it is a tougher matchup. Maybe he doesn't have 20 plus fantasy points, but I do think he is very serviceable. 15 or so fantasy points is still very realistic because of how dynamic he is. He can get it done on the ground, through the air, and if Quentin Johnson is out again at receiver, they could use Vidal a ton in the passing game. And even if Johnson is back, you saw how involved Hampton was out of the backfield. I would be expecting the same thing from Vidal. It just gives him a ton of different outs to score fantasy points, which we love. And I would not be shocked at all if he does fall into the end zone again in week 7. All right, moving on to our next category, smash starts. First guy up, you're probably a little frustrated with him last week, but it's going to be okay. And it's Quinshon Judkins, as he's been cooking as of late. We know he cooled off drastically in week 6, though. Not great. Didn't love to see that. 12 carries, 36 yards, 3.6 fantasy points. But I think we can blame the game script, the nature of how the game went. Cleveland got down early against the Steelers, and they just said, we're just going to try throwing a ton with Dillon Gabriel, as he attempted 52 passes. 52 passes. And he wasn't very effective doing it either, as he only completed 55% of his throws. It was disappointing because in previous weeks, when the Browns were down, they didn't care. They still pounded the rock with Judkins, and they just didn't do that this week. I don't really get it because Judkins is clearly their best player on offense, and if they want to have a chance at winning football games, they need to run the football early and often. Feeding Judkins is probably their smartest move going forward, and if Cleveland just would have committed to the run, which you can run on Pittsburgh, they have been a little bit better as of late, but the game wasn't like that out of reach. They were down 9 points or so at halftime. Like, they could have been running a ton and maybe they would have won the football game, but they decided to pass and it just didn't go very well. I do think Dillon Gabriel is a fine quarterback, but give the ball to your best player on offense, which is Judkins. But this week, all the signs are pointing to a monster game for Quinshon in week 7. The matchup is juicy against the Miami Dolphins, and they're currently the 28th ranked defense in fantasy points allowed to running backs this season. So if you have Quinchon, you're obviously starting him. You feel really good about it, and I do think he has a monster game. All right, moving on to our next guy, Javonte Williams, another player who has been incredible for fantasy this year, incredible for real life football as well, and he just had an off game. He had his worst week as a Cowboy last week. It happens. 13 carries, 29 yards, 2.2 yards per carry. 5 receptions, though. You like that, but only for 5 yards. He did see 8 targets. I don't know if that number sticks once CeeDee Lamb returns, but you like to see that as well. 8.4 fantasy points. Not great, but Javonte has been nothing short of spectacular this year. He's still the RB6 in fantasy, averaging 18.7 fantasy points per game. He has 3 top 10 weekly finishes already on the year, along with ranking 3rd in yards after contact per attempt. Better days are ahead for the Cowboys. Alpha RB1, and he likely has a massive bounce back performance in week 7 against the Washington Commanders, who just let a man named DeAndre Swift rack up 175 total yards on them on Monday Night Football. I think Swift is a fine player. I don't think he's a great player, so I think Javonte is a much better player. So if Swift can do that, I think Javonte can have a very strong game. I think you're likely looking at 15 to 20 plus fantasy points in this one. I'd be expecting him to blow up for your fantasy team in week 7. And our last guy on this list, another guy who let you down. He was on my start list. I apologize. Bad call by me. It's Jacory Krosky-Merritt, a.k.a. Bill. I do think Bill's season is still on. I'm not panicking yet. Let's talk about the good. We know Bill balled out in week 5 against the Chargers, 14 carries, over 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 receptions for 39 yards, 27 fantasy points. Let's not forget about that performance because that was not nothing. Heading into Monday Night Football against the Bears, he was set to smash, as Chicago has been pretty poor against the run so far this year, but it didn't go the way we were all hoping for it to go. 17 carries, 61 yards, not great. Ended up fumbling, not great. 5.8 fantasy points. While you don't love to see all that, while you were hoping for a monster game, I would still be encouraged with Bill's overall usage in this one. 67% of the snaps, 71% of the rush attempts, 46% of the routes. All of those were season highs for Krosky-Merritt. I think it's evident that the Commanders know that he is their RB1. He didn't have a good game, but I don't think they're going to go back to the 3-headed running back by committee situation. It's clear, it's evident that they want to use Bill in a workhorse role on a really good Washington Commanders offense that's going to be able to move the football with Jaden Daniels, who looks really good. He looked great on Monday Night Football. You want that running back. You want the guy who I think is really talented. Before Monday Night Football, he was absolutely crushing in efficiency metrics. He was like 1st or 2nd in every category. Yards after contact per attempt, explosive run rate, missed tackles forced. Like, don't forget about that. So buy low on Bill right now if you can, because I do think he's still in for a really big year, and he has a great opportunity in week 7 to redeem himself. He has another amazing matchup. Don't put him on your bench. Don't get discouraged. Start him again with confidence against the Dallas Cowboys, who doesn't have a run defense. They cannot stop the run, as we just saw last week. Rico Dowdle went crazy for 183 yards. Dowdle runs over anyone these days, but still, it shows how bad this Cowboys run defense is, as they are allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to running backs this season. I think Bill's another guy that's going to have a big bounce back performance. Don't bench him. Put him in your starting lineup, and I think you will be glad that you did. That's all I have for you guys today. I really appreciate each and every one of you. If you enjoy what we're doing here, if you can please like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, share this with your friends, and I'll see you in the next one.